Today, you and I are going to write a complete IELTS Writing Task 2 essay together. We're going to go through step by step through each stage, from understanding the question, planning our essay, writing an introduction, main body paragraphs, and a conclusion. At each stage, I'll teach you exactly step by step what to do. And then I'll pause and you can try writing each part yourself using our free workbook. That means by the end of this video, you won't just understand what a band 7, 8, or 9 essay looks like, you will have written one yourself. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So the first thing we need to talk about before we get into everything else is that there are actually 5 types of Task 2 questions. There are opinion questions, discussion questions, causes and solutions, advantages and disadvantages, and what we're going to work on today, which are double questions. Most of the stuff that we're going to be working on today does apply to the other types of questions, and don't worry, later on in the lesson, we will give you the structures for all the other types and show you exactly what to do. But first, let's focus on double questions. We need to understand what a double question is and how it's different from the other 4 types of question that you might get. Here we have the question statement, sometimes called the background statement. What this does is it just gives you the background information. It gives you the context. It helps you understand the general topic. Then in a double question, they ask you question 1, and then here they ask you question 2, and you must answer both of these questions in your essay. So question 1 is, why do you think this is happening? So it requires you to say, here's a reason or maybe a cause. And question 2, is it a positive development or is it a negative development? It requires you to take a position. A position just means that you say, I think that it's positive, or I think that it's negative. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on in the lesson, but all you need to understand really for double questions is always you will get background statement, and then you will get question 1, and you will get question 2. So I asked lots of our VIP students to kindly give us lots of their sample essays. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but I thought it would be better to use real students rather than I just write them, and means I can be a little bit lazy, but I think actually using real student essays is much more helpful. So what I would like you to do is look at this essay, pause, take as much time as you want. Don't worry if you don't understand everything. Feel free to just skim through it and think about, is it good? Is it bad? If so, what are the problems? So the first problem is there's no position. So they say things like, there are many reasons why this is happening, and in this essay I will discuss them in detail, but then they don't really go into that. And if you see what it says in the question, is it positive? Is it negative? The examiner has no idea. The examiner should be able to look at your essay and understand your position on that question. The student just hasn't said anything. So if we look here, they've said the first reason is advancement in technology. I mean, this is okay. This is not a bad idea. And they have answered the first question. But then they say another reason is, so they're giving 2 different reasons to answer the first question, but they haven't really answered the second question. There's no position there. And then if we look at the conclusion, again, there's no position here. So the key lesson I hope that you've learned here is you must answer both questions. If you do not answer both questions, it is extremely difficult for you to get one of the higher scores, the band 7, the band 8, the band 9. But don't worry, we're going to show you how to address each of them separately. We'll give you the structure. It'll be really simple, really easy once you learn this system. So talking of structures, this is the structure for a double question. So what I like to do is to teach students the job, the role, if you like, of each paragraph. Each paragraph, each sentence, each word should have a job. It shouldn't be sitting there doing nothing. So the job or the role of the first paragraph, so paragraph number 1 is your introduction. You are telling the examiner, this is what I'm going to write about. This helps the examiner understand what is coming up next. The body paragraphs, the role is to give detail, to give things like explanations and examples. And then the conclusion, the job that it is doing is just summarizing everything. Again, This just helps the reader understand what you just said. This is clear communication. If you think about writing as clear communication, or if you think about the IELTS test as, it's not a writing test, it's not a speaking test, it is a test of, if you move to London, New York, Sydney, wherever you're moving to, can you clearly communicate with people? Now, this is the structure for double questions. Don't worry, I have put all of the structures for all of the different types of question into one PDF for you. Go to the description and click on that, download your workbook, but come back to the video. Don't just look at the structures and think all I have to do is just look at them and magically you're going to get a high score. It will actually lower your score if you do that, because you won't really understand what to do. Download it, come back, watch the rest of the video. So the first part of our essay is going to be our introduction. There are 5 stages to writing an introduction. Stage number 1, analyze the question. If you don't understand the question, you won't be able to write a good introduction. Then decide your position, all right? Pick a clear position if it asks you about that. Sometimes position might be called opinion. Then you have to generate ideas, but only after you've analyzed the question and you've thought about your position. Then you plan everything out, and then, and only then, do you write your introduction. This is where a lot of students mess up, is because they immediately go in to stage 5 and they skip stages 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you skip any of these stages, your introduction won't be as effective as it could be. You'll start your essay and you'll get confused, you'll get lost, you'll have to start again, it'll be a complete mess. Please do follow these steps. So let's look at the first part, which is analyze the question. So there are 3 layers to analyzing a task 2 question, and this applies to any task 2 question. Layer number 1 is where students spend most of their time, and this leads to huge problems. Layer 1 is the general topic. So let's say the question is about health. What students do is they look at that, think, oh, this is about health, and they just write everything they know about health. It is important that you first identify what that common topic is. The reason why you want to identify that is so that you don't make that mistake. You don't write everything you know about that topic. Because within that general topic is layer 2, which is the specific topic. You're narrowing your focus to what is kind of the subtopic underneath that. So for example, if the general topic was education, but the subtopic was maybe about music and teaching music to young children, that is not generally about education. That is a very specific thing within the general topic. And then layer 3 are the instruction words. They are telling you exactly what to do. Some questions might say, give your opinion. Other questions might say, discuss 2 different opinions. Others might say, what are the causes and solutions? They are telling you exactly what they want to know. And most students don't actually pay attention to this and just write very quickly as much as they can about the general topic. Do not do that. As I said, you have a workbook that I have created for this lesson. So if you want, go down, download that and come back to this lesson. I have set you little tasks throughout the lesson. So you can print it off if you like, or have it on a separate device or in a separate window. But if you want to really learn from this lesson, try and do the tasks within the workbook, and I'll tell you when those tasks come up. First task is to analyze the question. Okay, so let's look at the sample question. Nowadays, more tasks at home and work are being performed by robots. Why do you think this is happening? Is it a positive or negative development? Let's use this 3-step system. Step 1, what is the general topic? Well, the general topic is technology. Within that big topic, they want you to write about not just robots, but how robots might replace humans at home and at work. And then if we look at the instruction words, they want you to say, why is this happening? Is it good? Is it bad? The examiner must be able to look at your essay and know that you have understood this is the instruction that they're giving you, and to be able to look at your essay and understand why you think this is happening, and do you think that it's good or bad within this specific topic, not this general topic. But the good thing about this is it's a system that you can apply to any question. If you follow that system every single time, it's It's pretty much impossible not to understand the question and give the examiners what they're looking for. So if you want, go and do task 1 in your workbook and come back and we'll look at stage 2 of how to write an introduction, which is to decide your position. So for double questions, they will often ask you things like, do you think this is positive or negative? Do you think this is a good or a bad thing? They'll give you 2 sides and ask you to take a position on one of those sides. So just think about it. Some people think this, some people think that. They want you to say which one you think is true. Easiest way to do this for double questions is just to pick the side that is easiest for you to write about. Even if you disagree with that side, but you know a lot about it, that's uncommon, but sometimes it happens. Just keep it simple and pick the side that is easiest for you to write about, not the one that you really feel deep down is actually true. And there is no right or wrong position. Both of them, you can make a valid argument for them. So let's look at a sample using our question. So we're going to focus in on the question, which is it a positive or negative development? Just a fancy way of saying, is it a good or a bad thing? So this requires you to take a position and keep it super simple. Either say, I think it's good or I think it's bad. Look at the question, think about it. Which one is easier to write about? And the way to think about this is just, can you think of good ideas? Can you think of ideas for this side? Can you think of ideas for this side? Can you explain those ideas? And can you think of examples for those ideas? You don't need to go into too much detail right now on this. That's the next step. But this will take you 3 seconds just to think like, which side? Okay, yeah, I know a lot about that side and I could easily write about that. Just pick that one and delete the other one. So now we have analyzed the question, we fully understand it, we fully understand what to do, we've taken our position. The next is we need to generate ideas. So what I want you to do is look at this essay, pause the video and think about is this a good essay, is it a bad essay? If so, what are the problems? So if we have a look at the ideas that this student has, so technology is developing very fast. It's quite vague. It's not bad, but it's quite vague. And people have busy lives. So she has 1 idea, 2 ideas. They need help with their daily tasks. We have 3 ideas here. Companies want to make more profit and they want to reduce costs. Idea number 4, idea number 5. Robots are more accurate. Idea number 6. You get the point. This student has done something that many, many students do, which is brainstorm. Why is brainstorming a problem? Well, I want you to think about if you've brainstormed before, how did you feel? Did you feel good when you were brainstorming? And did it result in a good essay? So brainstorming is where you take your topic, you create a little bubble, and you just think of as many ideas as possible. And hopefully, some of them will be able to help you with your essay. What is the problem with brainstorming? Well, the first one is you don't have time. When we surveyed our students and asked them how they felt when they were brainstorming, they said things like stressed, worried, confused, and lots of negative thoughts that they were having. This is mostly because you're running out of time. And then if you think about what brainstorming does is it generates lots of ideas, but it doesn't generate ideas that specifically answer the question. The reason why brainstorming was invented, it was actually invented by marketing companies thinking of ideas for new adverts, like TV adverts. And for that, it is amazing because you want to really think outside the box. You want to think of brand new creative ideas. That is the opposite of what you should be doing on test day because you're not trying to think of creative ideas. You're not trying to think of innovative new ideas. You're trying to think of ideas that actually answer the question. So not only does it waste time, but it wastes time even more because if you look at the ideas that you actually produce, most of them will actually be irrelevant. So it wastes even more time as you kind of sift through these ideas and think about which ones would actually work for my essay. And then because you're running out of time, you pick some of these ideas that are quite vague or they might be irrelevant and these end up in your essay. So you waste time to become stressed out to produce something that will lower your score, not improve your score. Not a good idea. So before we show you a much better technique, we need to think about what a good idea is in terms of writing an essay for the IELTS test. Well, number one, the idea needs to be easy to understand. Remember the purpose of writing. Why are we writing? We're not writing to get a high score. We are writing to help the examiner, help the reader understand what is in our head. And only if we do that, the result will be a high score. It also needs to be relevant. It needs to answer the specific question. So if you look back at the student sample essay that we showed you, some of those ideas are very vague, so not very relevant. Some of them are completely irrelevant. They don't actually answer the question at all. And then for you, your ideas need to be easy for you to explain and easy for you to develop. This is a very common problem that we see with very well-educated people like doctors, lawyers, engineers, people that have for years studied very complex topics, and they kind of bring that into the essay writing process with them, and they'll try and think of the most complex ideas. Well, those ideas are actually difficult for you to write about. If it's difficult for you to write about, it is actually lowering your score. And there are no extra marks for high-level ideas. There are ideas that are relevant and ideas that are irrelevant. That's the only thing that the examiner is really thinking about. So let's look at a simple idea and a complex idea. Remember the question, why are people using robots? Simple idea, after a long day at work, people are tired. Easy to understand, easy to write about, directly relevant, and a good test is, could you take that idea, tell it to anybody outside in any English-speaking country, show them the question and say, I think this is a good idea. Would everyone understand you? Or would they be like, I don't really know what you're talking about. That's difficult to understand. Can you explain that? What do you mean? If they're asking you those follow-up questions, then it's not a very clear, relevant idea. But if you said something like this, computers and AI have become much cheaper in recent years, so companies find it makes more financial sense to replace workers with machines. So could you walk up to the average person on the street and would they understand that completely? Well, they might ask you, well, why has AI become cheaper? Like, most people are not AI experts. Would you need to explain Moore's law to them? Then you would have to talk about data center infrastructure. And then we would need to have like a philosophical debate about the value of human labor. Now, we could do that, but you would need to be an expert on all of those things. And then you would need to spend a huge amount of time explaining them, thinking of examples. So simple ideas make your job much easier and the examiner's job much, much easier. So just use simple ideas. Instead of brainstorming, we developed a different technique, a much simpler technique called the direct method. So let me show you. Why do you think this is happening? Instead of writing a bubble and lots of arrows, just ask yourself directly that question. Why is this happening? That cuts through all of the complexity. And normally the first answer that pops into your head is the best. Other people find it easier to think, instead of what is the best idea, what is the simplest idea? Or some people like to use this technique, which is, if you asked 100 people, what would be the most common answer? Now, you don't have to use all of these techniques. Some people find one of them more useful than others, but try them, use your workbook, try them out and try and think of an idea using one of those techniques. And then for question 2, we've already taken a position. So let's say, for example, our position is positive. We think it's a good thing. We would just ask ourselves that direct question, why is it good? Keep it simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. Okay, so let's do this live. Robots are performing more tasks at home and work. Why is this happening? Pause the video. Think about this for 20 seconds at most, then write it in the comments. We look at every single comment, so we might give you feedback on it as well. But make sure you're using one of those techniques. Not brainstorming, just one of the direct method techniques. Okay, so what we did was, when we were working with our VIP students, we did this with them, and the most common answer was advancements in AI, artificial intelligence. And when we asked them why they think this is positive, it reduces the amount of work we have to do. Extremely obvious and simple, but those are the best answers. Now, if you got a different one, don't worry, put it in the comments and we'll tell you whether it is good or not. Like, you might think that this is a negative development and you come up with a good answer on why you think it's negative. Or you might have a completely different idea from advancements in AI, and we'll show you more samples later on in this lesson. But what you should do is go through kind of the checklist of, is this easy for the examiner to understand? Is this relevant to the question? And can I actually write about this? If you answer yes to all three questions, then it is a good idea and you can just move on. I've given you that checklist as well in your workbook. So we've completed the first three stages, and now we're going to move on to the next stage, which is the planning stage. So whenever I say to a class of students, oh, you need to plan, the first thing they think about is, I don't have time to plan. This is a huge misconception, that if you spend time planning, you're going to waste time later on. You're going to run out of time later on when you're writing your essay. So that's a bit like saying Google Maps is a waste of time. Why do we spend 30 seconds typing our destination into Google Maps? Well, that 30 seconds saves us a huge amount of time because we know exactly where we're going to go, because Google Maps will take us there. That's exactly what a plan does. It takes a minute or two to do that plan, but all of your thinking goes into that plan, and it means that you're not going to get lost. It's actually a huge investment of time, because not getting lost and knowing exactly what to write means that you will always finish on time. And the good news is you don't have to plan your entire essay. You can just plan your introduction. And once you nail your introduction, the introduction actually acts as a plan for the rest of your essay, which you'll see. So if we look at our workbook, this is a little plan that we can make. So you don't have to write all this out on test day. Like on test day, you could just have Q1, Q2. Okay, why is this happening? Very short notes like this. Position. Do I think this is good or bad? I think this is a good thing. Why? Saves time or saves work. And that, very simply, is your plan. All this is doing is just keeping your thoughts very, very clear on paper. Now, some people like to write a little bit more. Some people like to just do very, very short notes. But it's important that you do plan something, because if you don't, it's hard to keep everything in your head at the same time, especially on test day when you're under time pressure, you're stressed out. Just keeping things really, really simple in this way is keeping you on the right track. We're nearly at the end, where we've analysed the question, decided our position, we've thought of our ideas, and we've put those into a brief plan. Now, and only now, can we move on to writing our introduction. Before we do, it's always good to think about what is an introduction, and more importantly, what is not an introduction. So what is an introduction? Well, number one, it tells a reader what to expect. Think about it as a little flag where you fly it and you say, here's what is going to be in the rest of this essay. It helps the reader. So it's much, much easier for the examiner, for the reader, to follow the rest of your essay, to follow your main body paragraphs, to follow your conclusion, if your introduction is really, really clear and it tells them, here's what you're going to see. And it helps you organize your thinking. Anything that helps you organize your thinking more clearly and helps the examiner understand your essay is a very, very good thing. More importantly, what is an introduction not? These are the not to-dos. Number one, it is not a chance for you to show off your vocabulary. This is a terrible first impression to create, where you try to insert lots of fancy phrases and words in your introduction. The examiner knows exactly what you're doing, and you're probably making a lot of mistakes that you're completely unaware of. So just keep it simple and write your introduction as clearly as possible using simple language. It's also not a chance for you to hook the examiner. A lot of people write hooks at the beginning of their introduction, thinking that you have to hook the examiner in. Number one, it's not a creative writing process. And number two, the examiner is being paid to look at your essay. You don't need to hook them. Their salary is the hook. You don't need to hook them in. And then a lot of people put in proverbs and quotes and phrases. These are just memorized chunks of language. And again, the examiner knows what you're doing, and the examiner will literally just delete them. They won't pay attention to them at all, because you're not being tested on how many proverbs and quotes and chunks of language you can memorize. You're being examined on, can you clearly communicate in English? If you have to memorize hooks and big words and big chunks of your introduction, that is a clear, if not the clearest sign that you don't know how to communicate clearly in English. So don't do that. Just focus on doing exactly what we teach you in this lesson and you'll be fine. So there are 3 parts or 3 elements in an introduction. And again, this is for double questions. So part 1 is your paraphrase. So paraphrasing is just stating something again so that it means the same thing using different words, different language. Then you briefly answer question 1 and you briefly answer question 2. And the key word there is briefly. You're not adding any detail in there. You're just stating, here's what I think about question 1. Here's what I think about question 2. Now, a lot of people worry about number of sentences and number of words. This whole introduction will normally be 2 to 3 sentences, sometimes fewer than that, sometimes more than that. But don't worry about number of sentences or number of words. Focus on quality. If you're focusing on how many sentences are here, how many words, you're not really focusing on doing the right things. Just do the right things well, and length will take care of itself. So the first element is paraphrasing. So let's look at that in more detail. The first method that we use to paraphrase is using synonyms. So if we look at this example, I am a male teacher from the country of Ireland. I am a man, so man, male. These mean the same thing, but they're different words. Educator, teacher, nation, country. We've used synonyms to change this sentence so that it means the same thing, but it has different words. And then we could take this sentence and we could change it even more. So here we've changed Ireland to Irish. A man or a woman who is from Ireland, they are Irish. We've changed the form of the word to a different version of that word, but it means the same thing within the context of that sentence. But very, very importantly, just because words are synonyms doesn't mean that they are close synonyms. So for example, rich and decadent are synonyms. They have similar meanings, but do they mean the same thing? Are they close synonyms? Rich and wealthy, the meaning of that is tied to how much money you have. Decadent is more a moral judgment. It's talking more about excess, throwing your money around and spending it on things that are not really necessary. So you can be an extremely rich person and not be decadent. Similarly, country and kingdom. So a country is a state with borders. A kingdom is slightly different. So they mean similar things, but they're not close synonyms. Whereas country and nation mean the same thing. So be very, very careful with synonyms. Think about, are they loose synonyms? They kind of mean the same thing, or are they close synonyms? They mean pretty much exactly the same. If you want to be sure, just only use words you are sure of the meaning of. That's a good rule to have in general. But synonyms alone are normally not enough. What we can do also is we can change the structure of the sentence. So here's the original one. Nowadays, more tasks at home and work are being performed by robots. So we can change the structure where we take a noun or a keyword from the end of the sentence and we can flip it. We can put it to the beginning of the sentence. So instead of performed by robots, robots increasingly carry out tasks both in the home and at work. Then we can combine these two where we can add synonyms. So we've taken this sentence and then we change some of the synonyms. So instead of carry out, taking on, instead of home, domestic, instead of work, professional settings. So you can see if you combine those, it is a very, very effective technique. But make sure they have the same meaning, they're grammatically correct, and you have sufficiently varied the vocabulary. If you want to test your skills, go to your workbook, and I have set you a little challenge. It is task number 5 in your workbook. And once you do that, what you can do is you can use this little checklist to check whether your paraphrase is correct or not. Number 1, does it mean the same thing? This is where if you've used words you're unsure of, it might not mean the same thing. Whereas if you've used words you're 100% sure of, it probably does mean the same thing. Is it grammatically correct? So for example, if I wrote, I'm a male teacher from the country of Ireland, that would be Okay. But if I said, I am a man teacher from the country of Ireland, so man and male are synonyms, but wouldn't actually be correct. And is it varied enough? Now, a big mistake that a lot of students make is they think that they have to change every single word. And if they don't change every word, that's not paraphrasing. It's pretty much impossible. So, for example, if you change the word robots to robotics, that would actually be wrong. Robots are the actual devices, the actual things, the products. Robotics is the kind of academic discipline, the subject. So if you looked at that sentence and you thought, I can't think of any way to change robots, what will I say? I'll change it to robotics. Within that context, that would be wrong. Whereas if you just repeated the word, if you just wrote robots, that would be correct. You don't have to change every single word. Okay, so let's have a look at 2 paraphrases from our VIP students. So they've changed home to residential kingdoms. Residential, all right, that is something to do with homes, but residential kingdoms, not really. A very, very common overused word is plethora. A lot of students memorize this word, but a plethora kind of means that there's too many of something. So that's not what the question statement actually says. They've changed robots to robotic entities. Sounds fancy. This doesn't mean anything. It would have been better if they just said robots. Then corporate environments. Corporate is more about big corporations. Like, this is a workplace, but this isn't a corporation. In this modern era, again, it's memorization. Examiners see it every single day. And then there are grammatical errors because the student is using words they don't really understand. If you're using words you don't understand, you're far more likely to make grammatical errors, and it is full of vocabulary errors too. So not good. But many of you might have looked at that and thought that it was good because it has words like plethora, kingdoms, corporate, entities, and thought, oh, this student has a really high level of vocabulary. Vocabulary is 25% of your total score, but the vocabulary needs to be accurate. It needs to be correct to get that score. So if we compare it with this one, robots are increasingly taking on tasks both in the home and the workplace. It means the same thing. They have used different words that are correct. They've changed the structure. The vocabulary doesn't look memorized. It doesn't look forced. And there are no grammatical errors. So this is an excellent paraphrase. But as you will notice, it is much simpler than this one. Important thing about paraphrasing too is practice. You do need to practice. You probably do need to get feedback on your paraphrasing as well. The more you practice it, the more feedback you get, the more you're going to learn. It's just the way it is. So after your paraphrase, you will write that out, full stop. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to briefly answer both questions. Just keep it short and simple. You don't need to add length. You don't need to add complexity. You don't need to add detail. If it asks for your position, state your position only. Don't include examples. Don't include explanations. Just say, I agree, or I disagree, or I think this is good, or I think this is bad. Very, very simple language. And just briefly answer both questions. If you do all of that, you will write a very good introduction. But don't leave the examiner guessing. A good test should be, and this is something that I used to do in the classroom all the time with students when I was teaching this, I would get the students to cut out with scissors on paper their introduction and hand it to other students and get them to give each other feedback and say, like, do you actually understand what I think about the question, what my position is? And if they were able to do that, that was a pretty good introduction. We call it the stranger test. Could you hand this to a stranger with the question and your introduction, and they know exactly what you think about it? This is an introduction by one of our VIP students. Let me just talk you through how the examiner is thinking about this. They're looking at this and thinking, has this person understood the question? It's impossible to write a good paraphrase without understanding the question. They've understood the question. Their grammar and their vocabulary is pretty good because they have completed the paraphrase effectively. It's impossible to write an effective paraphrase without having good grammar and vocabulary. They're also thinking they haven't added in any memorized phrases or hooks or anything like that. This person has been taught by someone who knows what they're doing. Then they'll look at the second part of it. This is mainly due to rapid advancements in artificial intelligence. They have answered question 1. I believe this is a largely positive development, as it significantly reduces the burden of work on people. They have clearly answered question 2 by giving their position. I think this is positive, and here's why I think this is positive. So those 3 elements are all in there. The examiner knows exactly what the rest of the essay is going to be. Would you understand what someone thinks about the question just by reading that? I think so. To summarize what we have done so far for our introduction, we've analyzed the question using those 3 layers to think about it. We generated ideas using the direct method, not brainstorming. We've shown you how to briefly answer both questions and take a position. And we've shown you how to paraphrase and then put all that together. But you still have to write your essay, and it's very, very important that you do that, obviously. So let's move on to main body paragraphs. So the main body paragraphs is the majority of your essay. So it's very, very important, and it's where you give all the detail. But before we get into that, let's remind ourselves of the question. It is always a good idea during your preparation and on test day to always go back at every stage to the question. Really make sure that you are following the question and your essay is actually answering the question. So nowadays, more tasks at home and work are being performed by robots. Why do you think this is happening? And is it a positive or negative development? And let's also remind ourselves of the structure. So the structure, the introduction, is where you made a promise to the examiner. So think about it this way. You promised the examiner that you were going to talk about what you said about question 1 and what you said about question 2 in the introduction. You made a promise to them that you were going to talk about that. The main body is now you fulfilling that promise to them. So some students like that. I don't know why, but it is a good little mental model to keep in your head. So we're going to look at what we said in our introduction, and then we're going to put it into our main body. Like everything we do at IELTS Advantage, we have broken a main body down into its essential elements. So there are 3 elements to a main body paragraph. Every main body paragraph has these 3 elements in them. So number 1 is your topic sentence. This is where you're going to tell the reader, the examiner, what it is about. Then your explanation. This is where you give your reasoning or your reasons. You're explaining why you think your idea is actually true. And then we give an example. Another way to think of an example is evidence or proof. You're proving with that example that what you're saying is actually true. Now, every time I explain this to students, a lot of students will put their hand up and say, but can I do it differently? Can I put something else in, or can I change the arrangement or the order? You can do whatever you want. This is based on, more than a decade of helping students every single day. This structure, along with everything that we teach here, is not only what has been proven to work, but what has been proven to be easy for you to do. So if you are looking at multiple different sources and different books and YouTube videos and courses, and you have like 3 or 4 different structures in your head at the same time, that is likely going to lead to confusion. And on test day, your writing, your essay, will be a reflection of your thinking. If your thinking is confused, your writing will be confused. If your writing is confused, the examiner will be confused and you will get a lower score. So I know I say this a lot, just keep it simple. Just switch off your brain a little bit, stop worrying, and follow what we say. Let's look at one of our VIP students' main body paragraphs for this question. I'll read it to you. You have a think about it. What do you think is the big mistake here? So there are many reasons why robots are used today. Technology has improved a lot. People are busy and need help. Companies want to save money. Robots do not get tired. Did you spot the problem? So we call this the shopping list problem. So it's not really a paragraph. It's just a list of ideas. So there are 4 different ideas, and the problem with it is that none of them are developed. So each sentence introduces a new idea, but it doesn't really go into detail. So think about the difference between width on a topic. Your knowledge is very wide versus your knowledge being very deep. If you have wide knowledge on a topic, you know a lot about it, but on a very surface level, a very shallow level. So if I asked you something like, why are people using robots in the home? You might be able to give me 6, 7, 8 different ideas. But because your knowledge is so wide and not deep, you're unable to explain those ideas. You're unable to give examples on those ideas. Contrast that with deep knowledge, where someone might know one thing about that, and they can go very, very deep on that one thing, or maybe 2 things. So their knowledge is not very wide, but their knowledge is very deep because they're able to take that idea and they're able to explain it fully and go really, really deep on it. This shopping list problem is often where a student thinks, I know quite a lot about this topic, but not very deep. What I'm going to do is just throw as many different ideas at the examiner and hope that that does the job. That's the opposite of what you should be doing. The examiner is looking for clear communication. So how do you communicate to the examiner that you are a good communicator? You explain things and you give examples. Now, you don't need to be an expert on this, and it's actually much, much easier to do it this way, because if I said to you, can you give me 8 ideas? It takes a long time and it's quite difficult. Whereas if I said to you, can you give me the one idea you know most about, where you're able to explain it fully, you're able to give an example, that is much, much easier for the student, and it is much better to do that because it makes it easier for the examiner. One of the things that our VIP students like is this 3 pillars analogy. So think of your main body paragraphs, your topic sentence, your explanation, your example, as 3 pillars holding up a structure. If you take one of the pillars out, the whole structure collapses. You need each of them, and each of them needs to be strong, each of them needs to be good. So the first pillar is our topic sentence. So a topic sentence is the very first sentence of your main body paragraph. It should be just short and simple and tell the examiner what the main idea of that main body paragraph is. Just put one idea in there, make it a short, simple sentence. You don't need to go into detail, that comes later. Just keep it really, really simple. And all you have to do is just look at your introduction and paraphrase your introduction. So take a look at these 2 topic sentences. Which one do you think is better? So it's based on this introduction. I got 2 VIP students to write topic sentences for this. So topic sentence A, in the modern world, technology is developing faster than ever before and has had a huge impact on many areas of our lives. So they are taking this and they are writing a topic sentence. Topic sentence B, from a different student, people rely on machines because of the latest developments in AI. So if you want, write it in the comments, I think this one or I think this one, and explain why. It is good to not be a passive student that just watches videos and hopes that it magically goes into your head. That is why we've created the workbook. That is why we're asking you to comment so that you can actually activate the knowledge. It's been found in many, many academic studies that the more you do while you are studying, the more you retain and the more you're able to actually use on test day. Okay, so let's take one of these and show you what they did. So they took this from the introduction and they just paraphrased it and put it into their topic sentence at the start of their main body paragraph. People rely on machines because of the latest developments in AI. So what is the examiner thinking? The examiner is thinking, does this mean the same thing? Are these actually linked together? Yes, they are. Have they used different words? Have they paraphrased enough? Yes. So for example, advancements in AI becomes the latest developments in AI. And don't worry about changing artificial intelligence to AI. Some people think that that's like not academic. If it is very common and 99% of the world that speaks English would be able to understand what that means, then it's fine to use that shortened version of it. And is it short? Is it clear? It's one sentence, one idea. It immediately tells the examiner what the paragraph is about. And think of topic sentence as just a little flag or a little sign. Many of you drive cars, and I'm sure in the places where you live, there are stop signs, there are turn left, turn right, directions on where to go along the road. This is exactly what a topic sentence is. It is just, hey, examiner, stop, look, this is the main topic that I'm going to talk about. Just indicates and helps the examiner understand what it is about. So which one was better? Topic sentence A or topic sentence B? Hopefully, many of you guessed that topic sentence A is a problem and topic sentence B is good. The main problem with topic sentence A is it's not really a topic sentence. It is a background sentence. And the difference is a background sentence just talks generally about the topic, whereas a topic sentence says, this is what I'm going to talk about. And the topic sentence is actually answering the question, whereas a background statement is just talking generally about the topic. Also, this one is extremely vague. It is not using the specific idea that we used in the introduction. It could talk about anything, and that defeats the purpose of a topic sentence. It's also just not paraphrased from the introduction, so it doesn't link up with the introduction. And it's full of just memorized stuff, like in the modern world, stuff that students memorize all the time, examiners see every day. These are all just nonsense words. They don't actually mean anything. Just straight to the point, state what you mean. That's exactly what topic sentence B does. People rely on machines because of the latest developments in AI. One idea directly answers question one. It is immediately understood by the examiner, and it is paraphrased from the introduction. Now, let's talk about the marking criteria right now, because many of you might be thinking, like, why is he getting me to do that? Why is he forcing me to do these things? Well, everything that we teach is based on the official marking criteria. When the examiners are marking your essay, they have the official marking criteria beside them. I know this because I sat in rooms with other examiners for years and years. All the training is done on the marking criteria, and all of the evaluation of the examiners when senior examiners evaluate them is based on the marking criteria. In other words, nothing else matters. So everything that we teach you is based on following the marking criteria and forcing you to do what they say and what they want. So for task response is 25% of your total mark. Task response is basically, did you answer the question? So think about what we've done so far. In the introduction, we paraphrased the question. That indicates that you understood the question. Then we briefly answered both of the questions in the introduction, very, very clearly answering the question. And then in the topic sentence, we've taken that idea and we've paraphrased it. We've stated very, very simply, this is my topic sentence. This is the idea that actually answers the question. So everything that we've been doing is just hammering into the examiner. I understand the question and I've answered it. The next 25% is something called coherence and cohesion. Coherence is your essay clear? Is it easy to understand? And cohesion refers to, are the elements of the essay linked together? Not lots of linking words, that's not what cohesion means. It's, are the different parts of your essay, are they cohesive? We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail because it's really important you understand that. So it's important that we keep our ideas coherent and cohesive. So how have we solved that problem? Where our two main ideas are simple and they are relevant. And then we take those ideas and we put them into our main body paragraph and our conclusion. So the whole essay is coherent and easy to understand. There's more to it than that, but on a very basic level, the examiner will be able to understand your ideas if they are relevant, they're simple, they're easy to understand. So we have idea 1 and we have idea 2. So we talked about the different elements that are in our essay. Think of this as one element, and this is another element. How do we make it cohesive? How do we link that together? Well, our main body paragraph talks about idea number 1. Our next main body paragraph talks about idea number 2. Our conclusion is summarizing these ideas, the same ideas. So everything is easy to understand and it is cohesive. And this is actually the opposite to what most examiners see every day. What most examiners see is students write about some ideas in the introduction, and then in the main body paragraph, those ideas are different. And then in the conclusion, there's new ideas again, they're completely different. It would be like getting into a taxi and telling them, take me to the central train station, and they take you to the airport. That is not cohesive because you told them, I'm going here, and they take you to a completely different place. So another way to think about this is just to think about a chain, all right? So A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If one of the links is broken, the whole chain breaks. That is why we teach you to keep your essay very, very cohesive, where the main ideas match the introduction and the main body paragraph and the conclusion. And that's how all good essays are. So let's look at a bad example here. So in the introduction, this student has said, advancements in artificial intelligence is the answer to the first question. And then in their main body paragraph, they talk about saving money on labor costs. So they make a promise here, but they don't keep the promise here. The chain breaks. So your coherence and cohesion score will drop immediately because it's confusing. All right, and what are they testing? Can you clearly communicate in English? So now we know how to write a topic sentence. Now we need to learn how to write explanations. So here's the topic sentence that we're going to be using. You might have a different topic sentence. There's no one way to write them, but what I did was I gave this topic sentence with this question to 2 different VIP students, and I asked them to write different explanations. All right, one student knew what they were doing. They had gone through the course. The other student had just joined the course and they were just doing some practice. Which one is better and why? Why do you think it's better? Pause the video, have a think about it, and then we'll show you which one is better. So it's a good idea to kind of zoom out now and think about, why do we explain things? And think about the difference between speaking to someone and writing to someone. So when you're speaking to someone face-to-face or in a Zoom call or something like that, think about what the other person can do if they don't understand what you're saying. If the person I'm talking to my wife and I say something and she doesn't understand, what do you mean? Or can you explain that? Or like, she might just say, huh, what? This is how normal people speak. Think about the difference then when you were writing a letter. Maybe I'm in Ireland and my uncle was in New York. I had to leave all the explanations on the page, and I had to communicate in a way where they were not able to ask me follow-up questions. This is why we explain a lot more in writing, especially writing essays, compared to when we are speaking. This is something that a lot of students struggle with, so I've developed a few techniques to help students. You don't have to use all of them. Some students like 1 or 2 of them, some like all of them. But the first one actually comes from when I was a student in school. So the teacher would, in class while we were writing essays, he would be walking between us and he would look over my shoulder and he would jam his finger at the end of a topic sentence and say, so what? So what? In a very violent, aggressive way. Now, you don't have to think of it that way, but if you get to the end of your topic sentence, just ask yourself that question. So what? What do you mean by that? Why does it matter? And keep asking yourself that question, and it will normally force you to think, okay, I have to fully develop this. I have to really explain how this idea answers the question, what it actually means, and why this matters. So that's the so what method. It was effective for me, hopefully, but let's think of some other techniques as well. Imagine explaining it to a really old person. For me, that would be my mother. My mother is 80 years old, so she doesn't know a lot about technology. She wouldn't know a lot about robots and AI and things like that. If I was writing this essay, I would picture my mother as the examiner, as the reader. That would force me to explain it in a very explanatory way so that she would understand it. Another way to think about this is, imagine a child. You would speak to a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old very differently to how you would speak to an expert on this topic. Don't write to the expert, write to the person who knows nothing about this. And I think just the grandmother and the little girl, the little boy, just helps you put this into the real world and take it out of like a theoretical way of me just saying explain more. It forces you to write in the exact way the examiners are looking for, which is a very explanatory, simple, easy to understand way. So let's look at this method in action. So the topic sentence is, people rely on machines because of the latest developments in AI. I'm going to imagine my 6-year-old. He would say, what's AI? I don't know what AI is. And he would say, developments? What do you mean by that? And okay, once he understands that, well, how does that lead to more robot use? AI is like software, and robots are machines. How does that actually connect? I don't understand that. So I gave this to one of our VIP students and I taught them this exactly. And this is what they came up with. This is because big data and global connectivity means algorithms can now learn basic tasks. As a result, software does not need to be programmed. It learns from millions of devices around the world. So what they are doing here is they're explaining what AI is, how it has developed, and how that is connected to actual robots. They've tried to be a little bit fancy. They could simplify it a little bit, but overall it's pretty good because they are trying to explain that. So we showed you two explanations, explanation A and explanation B, and asked you which one was better. Well, explanation A was the better one because it answers that so what directly. And it has one idea that's fully developed and it shows the cause and effect. It shows, okay, this is happening with AI and this is how it is connected to robots. You don't have to do that in every single sentence, but they've done it here because it was logical to do that. And it just tells the examiner, this student knows how to use explanations. This student knows how to build an essay, build an argument. So why is there a problem with explanation B? Well, they said robots today are capable of doing many different tasks that humans used to do. They can clean our homes, they can cook food, they can assemble products in factories. Many modern robots can also recognize faces, respond to voice commands, and work alongside humans in workplaces. This is why they have become such an important part of modern society. Well, the topic sentence is about AI. Have they talked about AI at all? Have they explained their topic sentence? The explanation is not a general explanation of the general topic. It is an explanation of this. So does it actually talk about this? No, it doesn't. So the examiner is reading this and they don't understand why. They're like, so what? Well, so what about it can do all these things? What's that got to do with AI? Again, this is where students don't know much about the topic on a deeper level, but they know generally, okay, there's lots of robots are doing lots of things. Let's just throw in everything. That's just a shopping list. It is not a coherent, cohesive paragraph. So this tells the examiner that you know a lot about robots, but you don't know how to write an essay. And this is why it's not a knowledge test. It is not a test of your IQ or how much knowledge you have about that topic. The best students that I've ever worked with, they didn't know much about any of these topics, but you could give them any topic and they could write a very, very good essay because they were extremely good at writing essays and clearly communicating. Don't forget to go into your workbook and do task 8 if you want, which is to write your explanation. But even looking at that topic sentence and explanation, many of you might be like, well, that's not very clear to me. That is because it is lacking the third pillar. The example is often the thing that reveals the clarity. It reveals, oh, I fully understand this now. Okay, so let's look at two different examples. You know the drill. Which one is good? Which one is bad? Pause the video, have a think about it, and then we'll move on. And it is for this one, that same topic sentence. Okay, so examples have to have a few things. Number one, it must prove your point. All right, it must be linked to the topic sentence. Someone should be able to look at that example and think, okay, this is proof, this is evidence that what we are talking about in the topic sentence is actually true. So think about it as proof or evidence. So before I was an IELTS teacher, I was a lawyer. I couldn't just go into court with someone who, let's say they were caught speeding. I couldn't just go in and say, he's not guilty because he's a nice guy. That's just my opinion. All right, that is not proof. That is not evidence. If I was able to say, well, on the 16th of December, 2025, my client's vehicle was caught speeding on the motorway in Dublin. He was in Singapore at the time. Here are his flight tickets. Here is proof. There's a stamp in his passport that he was in Singapore at the time, thousands of miles away. That is proof that he is not guilty. Why? Because examples, proof, evidence aid clear communication. However, for the purposes of an IELTS essay, it does not need to be true. It is better if it is true, but a lot of students get stuck and they're like, I have no idea, I don't know any real examples here, but I could make one up that sounds plausible. The examiner is not going to hook you up to a lie detector test at the end and say like, Are your examples actually true? That would be crazy. They're testing your ability to write examples. They're testing your ability to use examples, not the truth of those examples, but make sure that they're plausible. Don't invent statistics. Like, I've seen students say things like 97% of people die of smoking every year or something. Like, no, they don't. It is dangerous. It leads to a lot of deaths, but not 97% of people. So avoid things like data shows, or a Cambridge University or an MIT study shows that 48%. You used to be able to use these, but examiners see them way too much these days. And IDP and the British Council recently said don't use them, so don't use that. So there's a few different ways to think of examples. The first one is the most obvious, which is obvious examples. So right now, can you think of any companies making robots? I can. The biggest one is Tesla, or there's Boston Dynamics. Now, I'm not an expert on robots. I've just seen that in the news. Those are the two that I am aware of. You might be aware of other ones. So those are just like obvious. It pops into your head immediately. Which companies are using AI in robots? Well, Tesla would be the only one that I know of, but that is a very, very obvious example. And then practical examples from your own life. Is this actually happening right now or in your real life? Well, I actually have one that is a vacuum, and I have one that is a lawnmower. I could use those. So this is just like experience from your everyday life. Do you know that this is happening? But be very careful with the next one, which is personal examples. So has this actually happened to you? If it has, you can use that, but you need to be careful with them. So the silliest example I seen was, it was about smoking cigarettes. A student said, for example, my grandfather smoked every day, lived until he was nearly 100, and therefore smoking is not bad for you. That was a real example from a real essay. Is it true? Did it actually happen to them? Yes, I actually spoke to this student because I was kind of amazed. Does this mean that smoking is not harmful? No. So the sample size of a personal example is 1. Normally a sample size of 1, or your family, or something that happened to you, is not good enough to prove a general point. I get emails about this every day, where a student would say something like, I got a band 9 in reading and a band 9 in listening and a band 8 in speaking, and I got 6.5 in writing. Therefore, the IELTS test is a scam, and the IELTS test is deliberately lowering my score to fail me. Like, okay, what is that based on? Well, it happened to my cousin as well. Okay, so we have 2 people out of millions of people, and when we look at your essays, objectively, they are terrible, right? They are not very good. So just because you think out of a sample size of you and your cousin that proves the general point is not actually true. I'm going to teach you a technique where you can convert a personal example into a good example that you could use in your actual essay. I'm going to show you how I used this with a real student. So I said to them, what are some obvious examples? The only one they could think of was a vacuum. Then I said, okay, can you think of anything else? They said, some people use those little robots to cut grass. I said, okay, do you know a lot about those? No, she didn't know much about those. I said, is there anything from your own life that is a machine that uses AI? She said, I drive a Tesla. Great. So you have a machine, which is basically, Tesla cars are basically robots on wheels that use AI to drive themselves. So could she say, for example, I use a Tesla? No, we change it to this. For example, Tesla records every journey their car makes and feeds this data into a supercomputer. You drive a Tesla, so what? And then she explained to me, well, all the cameras around the car, there's multiple cameras, and what they're doing is they are sending all that data back to Elon Musk, and he is putting it into his supercomputer, and it is mapping the entire world and is learning from every journey, and that AI is just constantly getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and that is how they are using AI in that machine to learn how to drive by themselves. All this information is now being trained to use humanoid robots, which are expected to help with household chores in the near future. So let's look at these two examples. Which ones are good, which ones are not so good. So example A was not good. For example, my brother bought a vacuum cleaner last year and he uses it every day. He told me it saves him a lot of time and makes his life much easier because he does not have to clean the floors himself anymore. It does not prove the topic sentence. The topic sentence is about AI. It is not about general robots. The question is about general robots, but the topic sentence is not. One person is not evidence. And then they start talking about a different point, which is saving time, which is not cohesive. And it just tells the examiner, this person doesn't know how to use examples. Whereas if we look at this student, they talk about data, they talk about learning, they talk about robots. This is exactly what the topic sentence is about. It is believable. It is a real company. It is a real mechanism. It is really happening in the world right now. And there's no like invented stuff like 80% of people are using robots to clean their homes these days, or a recent study found that 79% of people with gardens are using robots to cut their grass, or some nonsense like that. It's just like, what is a real thing happening in the world? And they use that. I want to talk you through what an examiner would think when they're looking at these two main body paragraphs. So if you start with the Band 8 student, people rely on machines because of the latest developments in AI. Clear topic sentence. I understand what this paragraph is about. How does AI make people more reliant on machines, on robots? This is because big data and global connectivity means algorithms can now learn basic tasks. Okay, the AI can learn how to do things. What does this mean? What is the result of this? As a result, software does not need to be programmed. It learns from millions of devices around the world. Okay, that makes sense, but I need an example to help me understand that. For example, Tesla records every journey their car makes and feeds this data into a supercomputer. Okay, how does that work? All this information is now being used to train humanoid robots, which are expected to help with household chores in the near future. Okay, I fully understand that. I don't have to agree with it, but I can't say that this student isn't being reasonable and giving reasons, giving evidence as to why this is happening. Contrast this with the Band 6.5 student. In today's modern world, there is many reasons why robots are becoming so popular in our daily life. So what the examiner is thinking, this student has memorized a template and they are just inserting the topic into this template. First of all, the technology has improved very much in recent years, and this is the main reason. So this is not an explanation, this is a topic sentence. So they've done background sentence, then topic sentence. This is why background sentences are confusing, because when someone is reading an essay, they're expecting a topic sentence. So when they read this, they're like, so it's about generally about, and then, okay, is this an explanation? Is this an example? They have no idea what you're doing. Also, people nowadays are very busy because of their work and they don't have time for household activities. So they started talking about this and then now they're talking about, so there's multiple different ideas. I'm very confused. Moreover, okay, now they're talking about something else. There's no explanations really. There's no examples. I've got a headache. You don't want to give your examiner a headache. But you might look at this and think, well, this person knows how to write English. Well, yes. That is the difference between 6.5 and Band 8, Band 9. Native English speakers, a lot of native English speakers have to do the IELTS test because some countries, like Australia, for example, force everybody to do it. And a lot of native English speakers will come to us and email us and say, this is ridiculous. I've been speaking English my whole life. I grew up in the UK and I'm getting 6.5 on this silly test. It's like, yeah, because it's not an English test. You know how to write English, but you don't know how to communicate clearly. And once we teach them this, they're able to easily get a Band 8 or a Band 9 because we don't teach, here's how to improve your vocabulary or your grammar, although we do that for other students. For those people, and for the vast majority of students that we work with on our VIP course, it is just showing them how to use these tools, these elements, to communicate clearly. So this is the full paragraph. So we have our topic sentence, we have our explanation, and we have our example, and we put all of these together to create one cohesive main body paragraph. In your workbook, write your example, and then you can assemble your own main body paragraph in task 10. So let's look at our student's main body paragraph for the other question, which is Is this a positive or negative development? Automation should be welcomed because it frees people from the drudgery of everyday duties. Okay, they're trying to be a little bit fancy with drudgery, but they used it effectively. But what is the examiner thinking? Do I know what is coming up? Do I know what this paragraph is about? Well, it frees people from work. What is the examiner thinking? So what? How does this actually free people from work? Our day-to-day lives are dominated by repetitive tasks that consume large amounts of our time. So this is very good because they're not assuming that the person knows anything about people's day-to-day lives. They are actually explaining it. If these can be handled by machines, people are free to spend their time more productively or enjoyably. So again, they haven't assumed that this person reading this understands that machines free people from having to do work. Can you give me an example of that? For example, there is now a robot that both cuts grass and vacuums carpets, and manufacturers estimate this saves the average person 3 weeks per year. As an examiner, do I know whether this exists? Am I going to Google it? No, but does it sound plausible? Yes. Saves person 3 weeks per year. They're 52 weeks in a year. Saves them, about 7 or 8% of their time. Sounds plausible. Am I going to check it? No. All good. Does the example actually talk about this? Yes, it does. So when you do this in your workbook, you can go through this little checklist. I like to create these checklists for students because at the end of the day, I can help you a lot on the VIP course and give you a lot of feedback and whatnot, but you won't have me on test day. So you need to get used to kind of giving yourself feedback. And one way you can do that is getting used to these little checklists. So every time you do this, asking yourself these questions, that will make you a very independent student who can give themselves feedback. And that's the goal. Even for our VIP students who pay for one-on-one feedback, we give them that, but we also give them these so that they can become independent, because I'm not going to be sitting with you on test day. Okay, so we have done our introduction. We've done our 2 main body paragraphs. Now we need to write our conclusion. So we're going to talk about what a conclusion is, the 3 essential elements of a conclusion, how to write it very, very quickly because you'll be under a lot of pressure. And then we'll look at proofreading and a final checklist to make sure that you check everything at the end to guarantee that you get a good score. So here is the question. Pause the video if you need to remind yourself of the question, and it's a double question, and we're looking at 2 separate questions here. So what is a conclusion? Well, number 1, it states your position. What do you think about the question? What is your answer to the question? And it also summarizes your main ideas. What are the key points that you have made throughout your essay? So a conclusion is just your position and a summary of your ideas. So a lot of students don't write a good conclusion, not because they don't know how to write a good conclusion, but they don't really care about it, or they don't really see the importance of it. And I want to tell you a little story about when I was a kid at school. We had a science teacher, Mr. Rafferty, and he used to give us very long, scientific journal articles, thousands of words long. And we always had a problem with this because we were kids. We didn't want to read very, very long scientific journals. And he taught us this little trick, which was, well, you don't have to read all of it. All you have to do is read the introduction and read the conclusion. And if you just read the introduction and the conclusion, you understand everything that was discussed in that article. So it's kind of a shortcut. So this shows the importance of the actual conclusion. A great introduction and a great conclusion, you should be able to cut that out and show it to the examiner only, and they should understand what you think about the question. So like most things we do at IELTS Advantage, we've broken the conclusions down into 3 parts. The first part is your cohesive device, sometimes known as a linking word. Then you state your position, then you summarize your main ideas. If you have those 3 elements and you do those properly in your conclusion, you have a good conclusion. So the first element is your cohesive device, sometimes known as a linking word. Common ones are in conclusion or to conclude. That's all. We don't teach any more than that, because think about the number of conclusions that you're writing. How many conclusions are you writing? You're writing 1 conclusion. Just memorize one of these and put it at the beginning of your conclusion, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. Then after that, so in conclusion or to conclude, comma, you state your position. So we've already stated this in the introduction. So all you have to do is just look at your introduction and make sure that you repeat that, paraphrase that, use different words, vary your vocabulary, but it should be consistent. Now I want to talk about something that we get a lot. So when we teach this, a lot of students will say, well, if I repeat things, I'm going to get a lower score. So this comes down to a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding of what the official marking criteria says about this. And it's actually very clear. It says, presents a clear position throughout the response. So it is stating very, very clearly that your position, what you think about the question, should be clear, not just clear in one part of the essay, but throughout your response. So if you're ever confused about anything, don't believe me, just believe what it says in the official marking criteria. And then element 3, we're going to summarize our main ideas. And how we do this again is we just use our introduction. So all we have to do is just read our intro, paraphrase it, and put it into our conclusion. Don't worry again about repeating ideas, we've already covered that, but try and vary your vocabulary as much as you can. But before I show you what to do, again, I want to show you what not to do. So I shared this technique with a student, and like most students, they understood the theory, but when they tried to put it into practice, they made a few mistakes and they needed some feedback. So let me show you what they did, and then we will show you how we applied the feedback so you can learn from this too. So they said, in conclusion, robots are very useful in today's world. They help people in many ways. Technology is developing fast. There are many advantages and disadvantages. So we can say it is a positive and negative development. So what is wrong here? Pause, have a think about it. Is this actually doing what we said that you should do? So we actually gave this student the introduction that we've been working on. So if we look at it, in the introduction, it says that it's a good thing, but then they start to say that it's positive and negative. So they're contradicting what is in the actual introduction. The introduction and the conclusion should be mirror images of one another. You shouldn't say things like, I think it's a good thing in the introduction, and then you get to the conclusion, you're like, actually, it's quite bad. You shouldn't change your mind halfway through because it's confusing for the reader. It's also very vague, so things like it helps people in many ways. Try and avoid very vague language. You weren't vague in your introduction, you weren't vague in your main body paragraphs, hopefully. You're stating clear main ideas. You should state those again in your conclusion. Again, they're quite vague here, so like technology is developing very fast. Why not mention AI? Why not mention artificial intelligence? When I asked the student this, they were saying, oh, my old teacher told me that I can't repeat any words, so I didn't want to do that, so I just wanted to, do something and finish it quickly. That causes a problem. So once we gave them that feedback, they were able to produce this. In conclusion, robots are taking over an ever-growing range of tasks, both at home and in the workplace. So they're giving a little bit of context there. The main driver behind this shift is the rapid progress being made in artificial intelligence. So they're just stating the same idea. And in my view, this is an overwhelmingly positive trend, stating their position again, since it meaningfully eases the workload that ordinary people have to shoulder in their day-to-day lives. So just stating the same thing again. So if we break down the conclusion even more for you, in orange here, we have our cohesive device. In conclusion, in blue here, we have the position. And then in green, we have idea number 1 and idea number 2. So in your workbook, task number 12 is to write your own conclusion. So if you want, go and do that. But your essay is not finished yet. One of the biggest problems that we see is students write quite a good introduction, quite a good main body paragraph section, then they finish their conclusion, but there's lots of little errors, and these little errors add up, and this can mean the difference between getting a 6.5 and a 7. So we're going to talk about how to proofread, and we're also then going to talk about how to find the time to proofread, because there's no point in teaching you this if you can't get it all done within the time limit. So how we teach proofreading is we get you to proofread 3 times. So the first time you're going to do this is at the end of every sentence. So at the end of every sentence, go back, read that sentence. Is it correct? Any grammar mistakes, any vocabulary mistakes, spelling mistakes, things like that in there. If there are, correct it. Then at the end of every paragraph, you're going to do the same thing. Does it make sense? For example, if it's your main body paragraph, have you got a clear topic sentence? Have you got a clear example, explanation? Again, are you spotting any grammar mistakes, any vocabulary errors? Fix them. Then at the end of the whole essay, you're going to look at the whole thing. So you're going to look at, did I structure it properly? Again, any of those small errors in there. So every sentence gets checked 3 times. So here are some things that you could check. I put them in your workbook as well. I'll not go through them, not list them, because everybody's different. But the big thing you're probably worried about is time management. So a lot of you genuinely do not have enough time to do this. So what we want to do is get you into a position where you have at least 5 minutes, and it's a comfortable 5 minutes at the end, to proofread and check everything. You might think that that's unbelievable and you won't be able to get that done, but I've helped thousands of students get there. So the way that we teach time management is we don't actually teach time management. So this is Usain Bolt. I think he's still the fastest man in the world. I'm sure people in the comments will tell me if his record has been broken. But before the race, did Usain Bolt look up time management tips? So before the Olympic final, was he Googling how to use time management techniques to win the gold medal? No. Why is he ahead of the other guys? He's ahead of the other guys because he's better at running. Our students, when they first start working with us on the VIP course, they're terrible at time management. They can't actually get there at all. But by the end of it, they are able to have at least 5 minutes at the end to check everything. But we don't teach time management. So how do they do it? We teach them how to become better at writing. Just like Usain Bolt isn't looking at time management tips, he worked on becoming the fastest runner in the world. You need to work on how to become the best writer that you can be. So proofreading and time management actually starts weeks and months before you ever book your test. So if you're doing this by yourself, after every practice essay, you should be looking through that, and because you have time and you have other resources, you can pick out the errors and you should start to notice problems. You should start to notice patterns. So you might notice that every time you're supposed to use punctuation, you don't do it properly, or articles are a problem, or spelling is a problem, or structure is a problem, or your ideas don't make sense. If you start to notice that, and you notice that those are common problems, then weeks, months in advance, you can fix those problems so you don't even have to check on exam day, because you've turned those weaknesses into strengths. That is the best proofreading, is no proofreading. But if you need help with that, get expert feedback. Not some teacher that has been teaching IELTS for 2 weeks, or somebody that got a high score on the IELTS test and is suddenly an IELTS expert. Get someone who has actually been an examiner, who knows what they're doing, and will tell you not just the mistakes that you're making, but the critical errors that are leading to a lower score. Again, they'll be able to point out your main weaknesses weeks and months in advance. You can turn those weaknesses into strengths, and then you don't have those on test day. So for our most successful students, what they say when we interview them is, yeah, I had at least 5 minutes at the end, and I did proofread, but it was just little typos, small little mistakes. So they didn't have much pressure, but they were able to pick out those little mistakes and correct them at the end. And for many of them, that made the difference between 7.5, 8, 8, 8.5. So here's the full essay. I've put it into your workbook as well, so you can read that at your leisure. These are students that ended up getting 8, 8.5, some of them 9 in their real test. You don't have to produce an essay of this quality. Focus on doing the basics, the fundamental things that we've taught you in this course, and you will do much, much better. So well done for making it to the end. There are a few different options for you now. Some students just will be able to look at the workbook, look at the structures, work on that themselves, and you'll be able to do it all on your own. This is the best option if you have lots of time and you are not too worried about what score you might get next. Other students might just want a little bit of guidance, maybe feedback on one essay, and maybe for us to create a roadmap for you. We normally charge more than $150 for that at the time of recording, but because you've made it to the end of this video, we can offer that to you for just $10. So if you want that, go to the description, click on that, and you can get that for $10. We spend a lot of time on this, so There's no guarantee that those will be available all the time, but if it's available right now, you can get it for $10. Or if you want the most detailed, the most comprehensive, the most successful IELTS course in the world, if you want to work with us one-on-one, it is called the VIP course. To reward you for making it to the end of this video, we will give you 10% off. Go to the description, click on the link, and you can get in if there are places available. Thank you so much. That was everything you need to know about how to write double essays. If you want more help with speaking, click here. If you want more help with reading, click here.